Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here and welcome to another Jin'terview. Today I am going to be talking to a good old friend of mine, Lasker Emanuel. But before we dive into the actual topic of this interview, I think it's only fair to very politely ask you, how are you today?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm doing pretty good today. Um, it's been a bumpy few months. I think people know I've been sick for a while. It's a chronic illness. I have multiple sclerosis. I still have multiple sclerosis. Some up, some down. Um, I I hurt my back after my last relapse, and it's been a big problem. But I did a bunch of work with physical therapists, and that has gotten better. On the downside, I've been having chronic migraines most days, and it's really heavily driven by light. So if I look at screens or I go outside, it can get real bad. They found a drug that was working for a while, then it stopped. We're still working on that. But some up, some down. But I can't complain. I'm very lucky. I still have a life I'm pretty happy with. So nothing to do but keep slugging.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about all of those medical problems, but at the end of the day, it's good to hear that you're still alive and you're still, more than anything, involving yourself with the community.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun to. I've always really liked stories. I think stories are interesting. I like reading about other people's stories, and I think probably regardless of how sick I get, I'm going to at least keep trying to do stuff because dude does a bunch of stuff, gets sick, doesn't do anything again. Is just not that interesting a story. I'd like to make and live a more interesting story than that.
I think that's a very wonderful way to view things. It probably explains a lot of what you've done in your past and even online. I'm pretty sure our audience will almost certainly know you first and foremost for your solo dread PvP videos, which are something I'll definitely be linking to in the description below. Um, but that's not going to be the focus of our actual interview today. And we're going to be talking about a story that you've written, I guess, yourself, and that's the story of you building up your own corporation, Night Odds.
Yeah, stories are what attracted me to Eve in the first place. I started reading about Eve Online back in 2010 or 2011. And I don't know if there were a bunch of videos. If there were, I didn't find them. What I found were blogs and people talking about the different adventures they went on, the cons they pulled, the kills they found, the disasters that befell them. And there was such an enormous variety, of course, because it's a sandbox and because people can interact with each other in lots of different ways. They can make alliances, betray each other, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, man, what is going on in that game? And I bought it, installed it, and logged in, and I couldn't figure anything out. I hung out on the Jitta Unduck trying to get people to duel me. I did not know where to go or what to do. I joined Red versus Blue at one point, and the idea that you would have to get on comms to interact never occurred to me. So I joined a few fleets, but then I couldn't tell what was going on because they were giving directions on comms and I wasn't hearing. It just never occurred to me that to play a game, I would have to get on voice chat with 200 strangers. So I quit. And then 2016, 2015, 2016, I came back and tried the game again. And this time it kind of got its hooks into me and I started playing more. Starting the core. So,
I actually want to take it a little bit back just before we get
okay,
to
sure.
starting the corp. What I really like to do is kind of give people an idea of the primordial soup that you were in at the time. You know, what was your experience in the game, and what was the position you were in before you actually made that decision to start it, or even had the idea to start it, or was that idea something you'd always had in the back of your mind throughout your Eve
No,
career?
I definitely always have not always had that idea. What I wanted to do was pick spaceship fights. I read Chesser's blog back when Confessions of a Stealth Bomber Killer. I read some other blogs. Um, and I wanted to get in spaceships and blow people up and get blown up. Um, and so I came back in 2016 and I started exploring because I read some things that said that was a good way to start out. And I got blown up a couple times. And I came to Pro V and got blown up. And then I ended up chatting with one of the guys, and he invited me out to his corp. And I thought, sure, why not? I'm not doing anything. And I moved out to Pro V. I joined some fleets. But what I really wanted to do was solo PvP. You know, when you're in the fleet, they're not really your decisions, right? You're doing stuff, and it matters, and it affects the game world. But a lot of the fun of a game for me is to have ideas and then see those ideas realized in the game, and they either work or they don't.
Yeah, I think both of us have kind of a similar taste in games from that regard, because we both quite like chess and we both quite like Magic, so we like that idea of strategic decision making in our video games.
I actually feel kind of the same way in real life. One of the things I enjoy the most is back when I was working, having an idea about a problem and then seeing the idea come to life and solve the problem, or it comes into contact with reality and it collapses and it doesn't solve the problem. And then you go about it a different way. You try a different. And so it seemed to me like solo PvP was sort of the heart of you're making the decisions. FCing, I guess, is the other way, where you're sort of the person whose ideas are coming into contact. I say those are the two ways. That's not the only ways. You know, people who run alliances, people who make big market plays, all of those. You know, you're having ideas and then sort of pushing them into contact with other people's ideas and seeing how they hold up. But so I was curious. I wanted to do solo PvP, and I was watching the videos and I was reading about it, and I started roaming around Pro V in a variety of ships. Everything from double nano Navy Omens to Hyperions. I did not appreciate how different those two things were. I just thought of them both as spaceships. But the people who came to Pro V to pick fights, they were much better than me. They knew things. They understood what their ship could engage. And I spent months trying to get a good fight in Pro V solo. And it was real hard because I didn't know anything. And then at some point, someone told me I should go to low-sec, and I resisted it for a while because I was like, no, I'm in Pro V. I'm a null-sec guy. And then I went to low-sec, and I was like, oh, the mechanics are different here. You can get fights easier. And I started doing that a bunch and started very slowly learning. I started out with kiting Tristans, and I tried to go into plexes and then micro warp drive past people. It worked sometimes. It failed sometimes. And then I found a SIG in Pro V that was doing sort of small gang type stuff that was run by our friend Rory. And I was blown away by Rory. He knew just a ton about game mechanics, and he was happy to give me pointers and stuff. And at the time, he was in PTB. And I was like, man, I want to go hang out with guys who know a bunch of stuff. And I asked him if I could come join. And he was technically a recruiter at the time, although I don't think he recruited anyone except me. And he's like, yeah, you can. There's not that many people US time zone, but it's fine. And so I joined up, and man, I was blown away. PTB was just full of guys who they like to play their games real serious. They knew things, they tried things, and I just had a wonderful time learning from everyone.
Yeah, and it was actually very wonderful to have you. You were a super proactive member of the Corp even back then.
It was fun. I like doing stuff. I like coming up with ideas. I like learning things. So we did that for a while. Then ultimately the PL invasion happened. We fought them for a while. Pro V ultimately kind of collapsed and retreated.
You're missing a little bit of your own lore in there, because you were the person who actually led the Dreadnought fleet for one of our biggest victories. You were the Dread true. FC in 3D TAC.
I was the Dread FC in 3D TAC. It's Dreads are a lot easier to FC if somebody else makes the decision about when and where to drop, and you're on grid, and what you're doing is calling targets. But yeah, that was fun. It was a fun fight. I was glad to be a part of that. I was glad to be a part of the long-range dread fight, even though I wasn't actually in the fight, but participating in the theory crafting before. That was a very cool victory where we were all trying to come up with ideas and people were helping with logistics and stuff. And we, at the time, didn't have a lot of great ideas on how to deal with blinky ravens. And we got just absolutely dunked in the first fight. And then we had, in true Pro-V style, there were like 3 or 4 different ideas and a couple different fleets fielded. But it seemed like a big part of what held the fort were the 20 long-range dreads we put on grid. That was cool. There were a lot of fun fights that I got to be a part of.
Yeah, I definitely consider the anime war to be like the height of my EVE career. And,
it was a cool time, and I enjoyed doing the Diplo stuff, and I enjoyed help coordinating people. It was all cool stuff. I really enjoyed it. It was fun working with EQ and all the guys. But then Pro-V kind of collapsed and fell back to low sec, and I get a little bit of wanderlust sometime. I wonder, what's out there. I like a little bit of variety. When I was working, I worked as a consultant, and every, 6 to 12 months, you'd go to a new gig and you'd meet new people and you'd solve new problems. And I like a little bit of variety in my life. So I kind of went wandering around. I went to Snuff. I met some cool guys. I had some fun there. I went to Init. I met some cool guys. Pando and Darkshines are both awesome. That was fun. I liked flying with those guys. I got to do a little Diplo work there. That was fun. And then at some point, some combination of, me being sick and also just kind of the state of the game. I think a lot of people felt it. The big blocks were and are real powerful. They were real secure, but they were kind of stalemated with each other. And one of the things I like about EVE, the sort of sociopath role play where everyone's real hostile to each other. I actually am not interested in ganking people or ganging up on them or scamming them, but I like that everybody else is because I enjoy playing a game with a harsh environment. I want it to be really punishing if I make a mistake. And then when something comes together and it works, it's extra satisfying. And so I was trying to think of what is a difficult thing I can do. And it seemed like starting a corporation in EVE as it stood at the time, starting and running a corporation would be a kind of new challenge for me.
Wow, so it really was just the actual challenge of doing it in the first place that drove you to want to do it?
Yeah, I wanted EVE to be harder.
And you figured becoming a CEO was the best way to do that?
I thought about a couple different approaches. I've never done wormhole stuff. I get the impression that living in wormholes is pretty hard. So I thought about trying to go join some wormhole guys. I had a short list of ideas. I can't remember what else was on it. But I wanted to try something new and kind of difficult. And that was sort of what I landed on. I like working with people. I think it's fun. I have spent most or all of my career as sort of an advisor to a process rather than somebody who owns the thing. And I have a bunch of ideas about how I think an organization should be run. So I wondered, can I start an EVE Corp and put some of these ideas into action?
So, what were the initial steps then? After you decided, this is the way forwards for me. What were the first few kind of things that you did to set up that foundation?
So my belief was that the most important thing was assembling a leadership team. And I don't know if this is how everyone would do it. I think some people kind of run their corp as a one-man show. I don't think that would work great for me. But I feel like I've met a lot of very capable people that I've enjoyed gaming / working with over my EVE career. And so I sort of started reaching out to people and asking, hey, are you bored? Would you like to do a thing? And, you got to be real careful because I'm trying real hard not to poach them away from an organization that needs them. But for people that were unhappy, for people like in some cases, I tried to approach guys who'd kind of gone AFK some, and they've kind of given up on the game because maybe they weren't having so much fun. And I sort of asked, hey, would you like to come back and start a corp with me? And a friend of mine, Cito, said, yeah, he had been a little AFK. And he's like he had started 2 corps himself in the past and kind of built them up. And then he had done it mostly sort of flying solo. And, at some point, like you build your corp up to a size and then, somebody notices you and they attack you and blow up your stuff if you don't have a set of connections and so on. But so I talked to him and he was real keen to give it a try. And he had been real effective in recruiting in the past. I didn't know that I would be particularly good at recruiting. But I talked to some other people. I talked to Destron, who I had gamed with in the past. I talked to Fard, and of course we both know Fard. And these guys seem interested. And I feel like to the extent that the corp has had successes, most of it is these guys. I have chipped in, but I don't feel like I've done, I don't know exactly how many there are on leadership. We've come and gone. Maybe there's 5 of us now, but if there's 5 of us now, I don't feel like I've done more than a fifth. It's been a very much a team effort. My buddy Carmack is a real life friend of mine. He came and joined up, and we started the corp up. Cito started recruiting. I made a video. I wanted to set us up somewhere where we would have a level of support, services, resources, etc., but not one of the giant blocks where the safety and the ISK making are so high that it's really genuinely hard to fail. And I settled on trying to go back to Provi, and I pitched to EQ. Coming back, I think at the time, literally there were 3 people in Corp, maybe 4 people in Corp, but he was willing to give us a chance, which was much appreciated. And we just started growing and building up from there.
So it seems like a lot of your initial steps were just going to people and just being very honest and open about your intentions. Like, hey, this is something I want to do. Are you interested in helping it? And using the connections that you'd made throughout your EVE career in the past. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Okay. I guess this also probably feeds into a question I have later in my sheet, and so I'm going to ask it kind of now, because you talked about building up that leadership team, and I think that is, and also one-man shows, and burnout is like a super, something that a lot of CEOs deal with, I think. And
yes.
Do you think that having a leadership team is like super critical to avoiding that?
I suspect yes. If it had just been me, this project would have totally failed at the start of the summer. So I got a little bit worse, and I started having more migraines, and it got harder and harder to log in. And the guys just kept doing the thing. Fard's taking out fleets, and Destron's organizing all the economic stuff. There's one guy on the team that I didn't know before we started that ultimately I promoted up, Ken, who's a fantastic guy. He did a lot of jump freightering and industry, but like I got to a point where I couldn't really use the computer at all, and I could maybe even look at my phone 10 minutes a day. And I could just talk to those guys. They'd ask me questions. They'd be like, this is happening. Do you want to do this or this? But they came up with good ideas. They proposed sensible plans. And if I had been a one-man band, for sure, it all would have fallen over them.
So when you talk about promoting Ken, I think you touch on a really important issue, actually, that a lot of people have problems with, and that's figuring out who to trust when you're trying to expand your directorship, or you're trying to bring new people into your leadership team, or anything like that. So do you have any tips that you would give on figuring out who to trust in that regard, especially given the risk of theft and other malfeasance like that, which EVE does allow for?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like in the real world, if you build a team, if you hire somebody for your company and they're, planning on stealing someone or backstabbing you in some way, they exist in a legal framework and there will be repercussions. Whereas in EVE, one, it's a game, but 2, by design, there's not that framework over it. And so you can be a sociopath and steal the corp, whatever. When I started, I swore that I was not going to promote anybody that I did not already know and trust at the formation of the corp. So like Cito, when you started an alliance and I came and joined you, I recruited Cito and he brought his corp. And there was, some chaos and we talked a lot. We had been friends for a couple of years at that point. I had never met him in person. But I was pretty sure that he wasn't involved in a long con where he was trying to set me up to steal something. Likewise, Fard, I had known for a long time. We'd talked about real life. Likewise, Destron, I had met him at FanFests. If all these guys, if they're running a con, it's an extraordinarily long con that starts out with me having no resources and not knowing anything about Eve, and them being really nice and helping me and talking a lot about their personal life. We get to know each other for a couple of years. Ortho was on the team. He was helping out with IT stuff. We've hung at FanFest a couple of years running. And so the guys I already knew, I was in a position where if they backstabbed me and stole from the corp, I would not be really at all sad about the lost ISK or whatever. It would be about the lost friendship. And I was pretty confident that they weren't going to do that. I thought I knew them pretty well. They had shared details of their real life with me. I thought I had a pretty good read on who they were. Ken's a special case. He joined and he had been in HiSec for a while, playing the game, doing industry, and he joined and he found the experience of being on a team of people out in nullsec who were trying to have fun, build a thing. He really enjoyed it and he just kind of went all in. He was extraordinarily helpful. And again, we talked a lot about our real lives, etc. I've met him in person. And again, there's like a threshold where at some point, if this person is trying to scam me, okay, fine, right? At some point, they're earning less than minimum wage with the hours they've invested in chatting with me about life. And so at that point, I guess I'm willing to take the risk.
That actually reminds me of something someone once said to me, which is sometimes your best directors are the spies.
Ha! Yeah, maybe. And we did have some problems with that. So we tried to create a real open sort of culture. Kind of everybody come on out. If you've always wanted to get into PvP, give it a try. I have spent actually a fair amount of time coaching people who are getting started with Eve, solo PvP, don't know what to do, where to go, how to fit their ships, just kind of walking them through it. And I guess part of the idea for the corp is to sort of get those people all in one place so they can help each other. And so sort of real open, real inclusive, and not making an effort to, hey, you've got to prove, you've got this track record, you've got to prove who you are. And we got, we got spies, we got Rocket X at one point, got an Alton, and Provi is a lovely place and has fantastic people. But, one of the cool things about Provi is anyone can FC. At some point, somebody had free move on a fleet. Rocket X hopped into, I think, Squad Command and warped half the mock fleet into a Titan bosun. Well played him, very clever. But the alternative is to close things up. And at the time, we didn't want to do that. We kind of wanted to say, hey, this is for everybody. If you've wanted to get out to null, if you want to learn to PvP, come play with us.
So would you say that, to some extent, you are going to just have to accept that there are going to be malicious actors in your organization if it gets big enough?
I think that most serious Eve orgs, to a certain extent, have accepted that. I think if you're small enough and you're kind of a elite organization, you can maybe try to hold the spies out, but it's so easy to make an account in Eve, right? And then try to sign up. Now you can put restrictions on, they have to be this old, they have to have this much skill point, and you can keep raising the bar. But particularly if you're trying to give people who have not done much in Eve a chance, it's real hard to keep them out. We've recently moved from CVA to Trigger, and they are kind of more of an elite organization. They want a high skill point total. They're asking that people have a subcap main and a dread alt. And as you do that, it gets more and more expensive to build the spy account. Right now, you're like building up 2 accounts for multiple years. And for sure, there are people in Eve that are willing to do that. But again, you're making the bar higher and higher, right? They can do it, but it's a bigger and bigger lift.
Mm-hmm. And I guess this all kind of wraps around to a much larger point, which is just recruiting in general and trying to bring people into your organization. And I know you mentioned right at the start that when you were talking about the people that you were bringing on board with your organization, that you noted that you expected recruitment to be a big problem. But even though you weren't perhaps directly involved in it, do you have any kind of tips for people who are trying to start that very first step of the recruitment process? You know, they've got their corp started, they've figured out who they want to run it with, but they just want to reach out and get people involved in it so that they can help teach them and focus their attention towards the corp itself.
I think so. There's a bunch of thought on this. I did some reading. I talked to some people, and I was involved in recruiting at some point. I think a lot of the advice that gets given is sort of be honest about your corp. Don't try to be everything to everyone. Your corp is probably not the preeminent PvP, PvE, solo, industry, capital, everything organization. What is your corp, right? What do you guys do? Are you PvPers? Do you do industry? Are you for new bros? Are you for more experienced players? And then just be really honest. There on the Eve Jobs Reddit, there was a guy, I forget his name, but there was a lot of drama because he was going to people's posts and then looking them up on Zkill and sort of rating their honest truth in Eve advertising or something. And there was a lot of debate about whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know what ultimately became of all that, but I feel like the best way to recruit people and keep them in your organization is to be honest about what they're getting. You've got to get the word out. So are you going to make posts on Reddit? Cito, who was in charge of recruiting until he left for real life reasons, which makes total sense to me. I think real life should come before game. But he said that he liked using the Eve forums, which never occurred to me. But he said you tended to get, I don't know. He liked the people he got when he used the Eve forums, and he was very on top of like updating the posts, responding to people, being interactive. Some of it's just inviting when people reach out. Lots of Eve corporations, there's kind of a running gag about how you gotta submit your diploma and a blood test and all that. And because of the risk of spies and all that, they're a little bit standoffish. And it turns some people off, right? Especially if they're sort of new to the game. If they're sort of an old hand, they maybe get how it works. But just, normal people skill stuff, right? Asking them what they're interested in, talking to them about what they've done so far, helping them figure out, is this corp a good fit for me or not? And that's the other thing I think I've tried to do. I don't know how successful I've been, but that's been the dream. When people came and they wanted to join, if there was a way to make it work, we tried to get them in. And then if they wanted to leave, we tried to help them. If they said, hey, this has been fun, now I want to go to Wormholes, I would say, well, I know a couple guys in Wormholes, maybe I can put you in touch with them, because it's a game, right? This isn't an actual nation state we're trying to defend. We don't have to live here. We're playing it. And so if they want to play it in a different way, hey, more power to them.
All right. So as you slowly did actually start to gain traction and recruit people and you started to grow bigger, what was that like? Were there any problems as you started to expand the corp? We talked a little bit about the organizational problems in terms of having spies, but how did it feel like socially or resource-wise? What were the growing pains, as it were?
Pretty well. I think the biggest problem I had, I really liked the inclusive, hey, everybody come on and play idea. And it didn't occur to me until later that if I do that, this seems obvious now in retrospect, if I do that, I will end up with a wide variety of people with a wide variety of interests. And my main interest is PvP. I like blowing stuff up. and we got some guys who were not that interested in PvP. We also got some guys who were so interested in PvP that they found Pro V's NRDS real frustrating. And I think probably if I had it to do again, I would have tried to sort of forecast a more cohesive message for what the Corp was all about and try to steer it towards what I'm interested in, because I think that works best. We had challenges, but a lot of things worked really well. We grew pretty fast. We got more members. We were pretty active for a long time. Recruiting fell off at some point. We actually had a hard time to keep up with it. We got lots of people coming in and then some people leaving. And there's just a ton of dudes to talk to. And Cedar did it for a while, and he burned out some. We had some other people help out some. They burned out some. I did it for a while. I burned out some. And I sort of had this image of growing it real large. And I think maybe we should have used a little bit more like the pandemic horde style, where you just take whoever, and if you get spies, fine, whatever, you boot them after they do the thing. But trying to like have a good conversation with everyone coming in about what they wanted and where they were going and what they'd done already, and also like try to do some level of spy checking. I don't claim to be particularly good at that, but doing that for each person with that many people on top of all the other stuff was a big lift.
Yeah, I can't imagine that running a corporation is ever going to be easy work in EVE Online. It always seems like it's a lot of personnel management. I guess that might actually be like kind of a good thing to touch in on, which is actually, what is it like day to day to run a corporation? What are people getting themselves in for if they, are sitting here and thinking, I'm going to be the next runner of Karma Fleet or some other large corporation?
I probably it varies from place to place. I feel like, again, because of the leadership team of very competent, trustworthy folks that I kind of put together, day to day it wasn't a huge lift. Sometimes there'd be some decision to make, or do we want to put up a structure here? Somebody wants to build a thing or find some ore. For a while, we were talking about, do we want to set up one of the jump bridges between here and there? Where would it be best to go? We did some corp fleets for a while. For a while before I started having the bad migraine problem, we would do some training events on CC. We'd get on and practice a little bit. That was fun. It was well received. Talking about different ideas people had, projects they wanted to try. A lot of people in the corp were interested in solo PvP. So there was a lot of discussion of that. A lot of guys started out doing faction warfare, and then they'd get into other stuff. We did have some more experienced solo PvPers join. One of the dudes who joined was Horde alt. And at some point I was going to try to pull him, like I knew he was a Horde alt, but I was going to try to pull him entirely into the corp because he was a cool guy and he liked to PvP. He flew around in Fed Navy Comets and Hekates. He was real active, but he hated NRDS. He couldn't stand it. I feel like it's pretty straightforward. Everyone's costs, so you can mostly shoot people. There's like a handful of exceptions, but it grated on his nerves and he left and went somewhere else. Sometimes people have real world problems and they just want someone to talk to. And I'm fine with that. I'm happy to talk to people about the real world problems. I actually really enjoy solving problems, which is part of the reason I was a consultant in my career. I like having a problem to chew on and try to find a way to, come at it from this angle, come at it from that angle, outthink it, outwork it, whatever.
Okay. So that kind of actually leads into the next question, which is that, just to preface this, a lot of the CEOs that I've spoken to in the past, people who've run larger corporations, they've always emphasized to me the importance of trying to create a community as a key part of like the long-term success of your corp. Is that something you agree with? And if so, how did you try and promote that in Night Odds?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think people play EVE Online For a lot of reasons, but I think one of the main reasons they play is because their friends play. They like the people they play with, and they enjoy logging on, chatting with them. Um, I feel like I did okay, but not great, creating a community with the corp. Because one of the best ways to do that is to log in and fly with people. And as we were starting to get to be reasonably sized, that's when the migraines kicked in. And much of my corp management was talking on Discord, and I was not logged in that much. And so I think it would have been easier to build this sort of culture that kind of gets people tied together. If I had been taking out corp fleets, if I'd been joining corp fleets, if we had been sitting on comms and chatting, and like through the summer, there wasn't a ton of that. And then at one point, we even talked about breaking up towards the end of the summer. And then I started taking these drugs, and I was doing better and logging in more. And we decided, no, we're not going to break up. We're going to move to Trigger. And then I had a relapse, and the drug stopped working, and my migraines came back. So that's been a big impediment. But again, the guys have done a great job of keeping the lights on. And God willing, if I can find the right drug and the migraines stop, I'm real eager to get back online and blow up some spaceships.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of shared goal of just everyone wanting to, log on and blow up spaceships is what keeps you together? And do you think that like kind of having that shared goal is an important part of running a corporation? I
think just for humans in general, having shared goals is a big part of what binds them together. Shared goals and shared values. And I don't think Eve corporations are different than other organizations in that regard.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because that's probably like a good piece of advice for someone who's looking to run a corporation is, think about something that you really like doing in the game and other people like doing in the game, and just try and create an environment where people can do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, it sounds very simple, but I think a lot of people don't think about it. They think about, I want to make a great corporation. They don't think about how they can make a great place where other people can play EVE Online, if that makes sense.
Right, absolutely. So I've always felt like one of the big secrets to success in life is, as you're doing anything at all, as you interact with other humans, try to find a way to make it as good for them as possible. So you're talking to a bureaucrat at the DMV, and they're bored and frustrated, and you're bored and frustrated, but they're still a human being, and there's zero reason you can't be polite and talk to them nicely. Even though you're frustrated with the system, because they didn't design the system, they don't control the system, they showed up to work, they're doing their job. There's zero reason you can't be polite, you can't be pleasant, you can't try to make it as fun as possible. And I always tried to do this in all of the various interactions I'd have throughout my day, but especially at work, where you see the same people over and over again. You're doing a project, there's long hours to put in, whatever. There's zero reason we can't all have fun together. But I think it's drastically more true of EVE Online, where people people show up to work whether or not they're having fun because they like being able to pay their mortgage and eat food. But I think I think they will go farther, do more, better work if they're having a good time, in addition to doing their thing. But for EVE Online, they don't need to log in to pay their mortgage. They do it for fun. And so if you're going to build an organization in EVE Online, yes, you have goals. Yes, you'd like to control Sov or be the top of the kill board or whatever. But I think that road runs through your members having a good time.
Very important to keep in mind, yeah. After all, it is a game. People want to have fun in their games.
People play games for fun.
So, can you think of any easy-to-make mistakes when running a corporation that you wish someone had kind of warned you about?
I think the lack of focus one is one you hear about a lot, where somebody's trying to make their corporation. They have 5 friends and they're trying to attract more people, and they say, we're the preeminent PvP, PvE, fleet, solo, small gang, subcap, cap, industry, mining, and it's not true. But if you're like, hey, we've got a handful of guys who are kind of tight-knit, we'd like to add some more, and we're really into whatever you're into, and be honest about it, I think that's good. I do think people kind of do the one-man band too much and burn themselves out. Eve is cool because it's so complex and it demands so much to succeed. But it's real easy to, be pouring in that energy and you're having some success, and then I don't know, something happens in your real life and you gotta spend more time at work or you have a baby or whatever, and then you just gotta stop. And so I think there's a lot to be said for having a group of guys that can help keep the thing going. And then I think a lot of people also try to start a corp and they decide they're gonna put their corp in a wormhole, or they're gonna do something where their corp stands totally alone. And that's real hard because it's a sandbox game. One of the most powerful things you can do is bring more friends. I've never been real excited about being the guy who's on the side of the fight that has bigger numbers. It happens sometimes. It is what it is. But for me, the fun has always been, can we come up with a clever way to make it work despite our disadvantages? But if you're new to the game and you're starting a corp, and you don't already know a ton about it, it's going to be really, really hard to make your corp stand alone and survive. And so maybe think about figuring out who you could ally with. Now, which of the organizations are going to want you if you've got a brand new corp with 5 people? And it may not be, whatever you think the best organization in the game is, it may not be them because they want a corp with 300 active members and everybody's got a dreadnought. Okay, fair, but there's probably some group that would like to have you, and go start out there and then figure out what you want to do next.
Awesome. Well, there's one final thing I want to ask, which is, because this is something that I always find very important, and that's just, was there any piece of advice that someone gave you that ended up really sticking in your mind or being particularly useful during the whole process? It doesn't have to be from Eve, it can definitely be from real life as well. Whatever kind of golden rule or heuristic that you were keeping in mind?
That's a great question. So I feel like I've got a ton of advice from a ton of people over the course of my life. And like one of my favorite things to do, and this sounds a little silly, is, but so I'll answer with this with a bit of a story. Years ago, my wife and I used to watch The West Wing. And I forget the character, but one of the characters, somebody was asking him why he did a thing. And he said that he always found it hard to understand people who didn't race sailboats competitively, which sounds like a silly thing to say. But then he went on to explain that when you race sailboats, you're always trying to do anything you can to adjust the sails or the hull or the weight of the people on the boat to pick up an extra quarter knot of speed. And I feel that way. I love trying to find a way to do anything a little bit better, to squeeze out, an extra little bit of speed, performance, anything. And so it's really, really hard for me to pick like the one bit of advice I got because I feel like I get a lot. And I think a lot about how best to do anything. But I'm going to share one from real life, and I think this is maybe in light of the migraines and my desire to keep going. A friend of mine passed recently. He was older. He's a gentleman I worked with. I think he was 70. He might have been 69. He's a great guy. I liked working with him. He was reliable. He was fun to hang out with. He got shit done. I never saw him do the easy thing when he had a way to do the right thing instead. And as I was thinking back over the time we knew each other, I realized that he said something to me once that I internalized and made one of my rules. And we were talking about, he had come off a bad deal with a difficult partner, and it was very much not enjoyable. And I was kind of asking him, oh man, how did you put up with that? And he said, well, I feel like I can stand anything for 6 months. And I remember being very struck by it. And I knew the partner. He was an unpleasant guy. And I think it was probably a pretty unpleasant 6 months. But he's right. Time keeps on rolling and you move on to the next thing. Sometimes unpleasant shit happens. And I sort of internalized that. And my rule in my head was one should be able to stand something for 6 months. And then when the 6 months is over, well, now the next 6 months begins. Complaining about things doesn't really help that much. So that bit of advice, I'm real glad he said that to me. I'm glad he shared it with me. Feel like I can stand anything for 6 months.
Well, now you're sharing it with thousands of more people.
Hopefully they find it helpful.
Indeed, I'm sure I will. That's a very profound quote. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, Lasker. And first of all, I have to thank you for your time, but is there anything else you wanted to mention to the audience before we go?
No, thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate you having me out, and hopefully the audience enjoys.
Alright, well, as I said right at the introduction, please make sure to go and check out Lasker's channel. I'll probably leave a link to your Twitch as well, although I don't know if you're going to be streaming anytime soon. I'm sure people should just follow you so that they can be right on it when you inevitably do.
Thus far, I've done one stream, but I dream of doing more.
Brilliant. Are there any other places that I should link? Any social medias? That kind of stuff?
I think that's it. I've actually thought about starting a bunch of different stuff, but so far it's just the YouTube and the...
Alright, now before we go, I do have to give a special thanks, as always, to our Crassuses. Pinche Infidel from Old School, Brood from Triumvirate, and Zolka Lando, as well as to our other $5 patrons in Dustin Prater, Crazy Daisy, Zar, Olav Oldan, Kem, Raphael, Big Bada Boom, Dunk Dinkle, and the Ashval Federation. If you want to support the channel yourself, you can either check out the Patreon link in the description below, or if you'd like, just share the video with someone else who you think might enjoy it. Until next time, have a good day and fly smart.